Thanks a lot. Good afternoon. My name is Iosif Itkin. I am CEO and co-founder of Exactpro. Exactpro is open access software testing branch of the London Stock Exchange Group. We do functional and non-functional testing for all of the group's own markets. We also provide service to other exchanges, market infrastructures, banks, brokers, and other financial services worldwide. 1 in every 8 LSE employees work in our business fully dedicated to software testing. Our focus is deliberate practice of software testing. As many other organizations, London Stock Exchange and many of our clients are undergoing agile transformation. And when people talk about software testing and agile, they sometimes wonder if there is any room left for independent QA nowadays. As a result, we often receive requests to confine QA into Scrum teams. At our client scale, it is usually not a single Scrum team, but rather a train of teams or several trains, like a prison for software testers. So we have to formulate and follow some principles of surviving and keeping our internal freedom in such harsh environment. In one of his books, a famous Russian author, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, mentioned a saying among the prisoners of Gulag that helped them survive during daily interactions with prison authorities. It states, "No trust, no fear, no begging." There are hundreds of articles in the internet stating that Agile requires trust. However, complex and stable systems are not built on trust. They are built on absence of trust. Think about it. You do not trust that you will be able to elect ideal president every time. Instead, you put a system of checks and balances in place, and that gives you a stable society. If you put blind trust into anything, even if the idea looks great, you may end up living in dystopian nightmare. 7 years ago, Exactpro was a very small team. We employ over 500 specialists now. We build software to test software, and we use our own gateways to connect to the system. This allows doing independent automated testing. For example, we have two selfies that helps us a lot during connectivity testing for many brokers and exchanges. The fact that it is independent allows to truly check connectivity. Frequently, we receive requests to automate everything. Sometimes that contradicts our concept of deliberate practice of software testing. Deliberate practice is not repeating something for 10,000 hours. Rather, deliberate practice means constantly applying your brain power to stretch and improve yourself. Many people drive their car to and from work for many hours, but never achieve true mastery. Why? Because in most cases, we switch our brain off when we're doing repeatable things. Automating every user story without taking context into account is the closest thing to switching your brain off. For our markets, we automate test libraries consisting of tens of thousands and more scenarios. In doing so, though, we are not wasting resources on automating user interfaces that will change in the next sprint. Same people who insist on automating everything, frequently also ask to collocate QA teams with software development. Think about a firefighting robot. It was created to help firefighting team to put out fires. Do you really need robot operator to be sitting in a burning building where the robot is working? On the other hand, creating such a robot is a sophisticated technical process. It might require a separate development team that is not embedded in any existing Scrum team. We've managed to create multiple testing tools, including ClearTH. It is a very complex system that is based on replicating complex operational life cycle and reference data setup of post-trade systems. It is capable of executing thousands of scenarios in unattended mode, but it is not possible to create such software as a part of a Scrum of embedded into Scrum instead of a separate software development team. It makes more sense to collocate QA this business, and we therefore trying to maintain our presence in most of our client locations. But it is important not to underestimate that currently quite a lot of information can be obtained from the systems themselves. Everyone talks nowadays about big data and machine learning, but frequently people forget that they can look at their own systems already in production as a source of valuable information. We have seen it as anti-pattern already. A company is migrating to a new platform, and it is necessary to implement connectivity to the legacy platform. But instead of looking at the actual data that is readily available, people tend to look into specifications that describe how the system is supposed to work. And you do not need to be collocated to obtain valuable insight from the data. Listening is sometimes more important than talking. So we have created a passive testing tool capable of reading wire and log files. We extract them and store for processing to run many checks against them to find patterns and problems. We also use passive testing approach for latency measurement across all our markets. Passive testing can also help with client onboarding, and even it is possible to use passive testing for crowdsourcing. Let's talk a bit about cross-functional team. We believe that excellence is achieved through focus. When you call 911, both the police and paramedics arrive. A policeman can offer some immediate medical assistance, but any complex case requires a medic. Policemen and medics have the same purpose, saving and protecting human life. However, they have different mentality, which allows each of them to do their work better. Software developers focus on building software. Software testers focus on finding failure. These are different attitudes. Both are required. One is not okay without the other. It is said, however, that the very presence of a separate software testing team removes the ownership from software developers for software quality. I would like to recommend a book. Its name is Extreme Ownership. Usually, you can't expect that your software development team, your Scrum team, will consist of individuals with superhuman abilities, extremely professional, tireless, dedicated, selected through elaborate process among dozens and hundreds of people. But if there is any representation of ideal Agile team, it is of course a squad of Navy SEALs. They truly take extreme ownership of the quality in everything they do. This superb cross-functional team can accomplish a lot of missions by themselves. You can only dream to have something like that as software development team. But read the book and you'll find something unexpected. The team is self-sufficient, ultimate Agile team. But when they plan any of their operations, they always consider that the things are likely to go wrong. And in that case, some firepower support will be required. So this is the way to run operations efficiently. And independent software testing is like firepower support, like tanks. And it is required even by the best Agile teams known to humanity. And speaking about firepower, we have a lot within our group. So LSE operates some of the most advanced and high-performance systems. Average round-trip latency is below 84 microseconds. And last year, on particular days, we exceeded 128 million of transactions per single platform. To stress test such systems, we also need to use unbiased, independent, dedicated testing tools. To reduce the required hardware footprint for such tools, we make them very simple but powerful. Idea is like throwing a bag of nails. You can break any system, but at the same time, it is very cheap and not expensive. In addition, we use testing tools that mimic real market participants and look at the system as real traders do, mini robots. They can spot problems missed by load generation or data analysis tools as they look at the system, once again, from entirely different perspective. So now going into fears. One of the common fears is to have unrealistic performance testing. Our strong view is that you should not be afraid. The test can be unrealistic. By limiting your validation to only production-like scenarios, you will not be able to prepare for the things to come. Frequently, people are afraid to break the system and go only to a certain level of volume and throughput, considered to be realistic. We always try to test the system until it breaks down. It is important to observe what will happen when the system is no longer able to stand the load. Microbursts do happen in the real world, and any throughput level previously considered to be unrealistic will be observed at least on micro scale sooner or later. Don't be afraid to stretch the limits. Let's talk about defects. If they leak out of sprint, should we be afraid or not? Software testing is relentless learning. Defects are the best source of information about the system. They help everyone to understand the system better. They help develop better software testing tools and libraries. Defects serve as a great collaboration tool between software developers, business, and QA. Frequently, the absence of defects is not the evidence of ideal quality, but just a consequence of confirmation bias and groupthink. The presence of defects, on the other hand, within software development life cycle between different sprints, it is what makes your system anti-fragile. But there is one kind of defect that probably you should be afraid of. It is what happens when critical defects leak into production. Sure, it is one thing that you can be afraid of. Our view is that production outages are like that, in the sense that they are inevitable in complex technology systems. It is not a question of if, it is a question of what will we do when it happens. Always assume that the system will break. It is the only way to get a truly resilient system and avoid situations when problems turn into disaster. To have a good life, one needs to always think about death. So if you fear death, you'll die. Asking questions is critical for software testing, but begging is not asking. Begging is asking for something that you will not get, and you do not need things that you will not get. Your plan should not include anything that you can't trust. For example, if you are asking for confirmation that production has the same configuration as the test environment, it is not okay, because you can't really rely on the confirmation unless you can validate it. Requesting that only tested drops come out of sprints from development into QA. We do not ask for it, as we do not need it. We do not need a quality gate between software development and QA. Early testing is a better way to push forward. And defects are one of the best learning tools. There is no need to confine QA in a Scrum team. Instead, the focus should be on individuals and interactions capable of finding defects. There is no need to request all scenarios up front for test-first development. Instead, focus should be on delivering working software. Defects should be used as a collaboration tool instead of tracking internal SLAs between sprints that are not going into production. Deliberate practice of software testing enables you to respond to change in a truly agile manner. Thank you.
Is there a question for Iosif? Yes, gentleman there. If you don't mind just waiting for the mic and introducing yourself.
Hi, I'm David Harrison from Untitled Chapter. You talked about doing NFT and performance and outside of the sprints and outside of the normal development. Is there some things that could be incorporated into the sprints to increase that coverage so that when you get to that stage you've got what you would say a more safer environment to do those larger scale tests?
My view, and view of some of my colleagues, not all of my colleagues, but some of my colleagues, is that usually there is not enough firepower within a Scrum or a Sprint team to support what is really necessary for performance testing. So currently, what we need to do is not just stress the system or run functional testing, but we need to run tests at the confluence between functional and non-functional testing. So we need systems that are capable, on one hand, stress the system, on another hand, process everything to analyze that the system behaves functionally correctly under heavy load. And if you think about such systems, these are the closest thing to real production systems. You can't create them by having two people within Scrum team that is at the same time supporting immediate fixes and immediate implementation within Sprint.
And there's a David Morris has a question.
Thanks very much. Sorry, actually two questions, just to follow on from the last one. In my last role, I had an Agile team dedicated to performance, so we operated on a Kanban basis. We supported performance testing related to the releases, but we did a lot of performance tests outside of release as well. So I just reflecting on your last comment, maybe you can comment on that sort of a model. So that's question number one. And the second question, the last part of your presentation, you said defects from sprint should be used to promote collaboration and not tracked unless it's going into prod. So it was the last thing you said. I appreciate a little bit more elaboration on that. It was quite an interesting comment. Thanks, Iosif.
Sure. So on the first part, yes, I certainly do agree that if they are not, if they are forced to call things Scrum teams, etc., then having dedicated teams targeted on particular areas like performance testing or creating particular test automation tools is the way forward. On the second, yes, I think that so what we see is when defects are hidden, if they are not leaking out of internal sprint, so it actually prevents valuable information sharing between all the teams. And it usually, so in our world, we are not talking about a single Scrum team. We are more talking about training. So when there are strong KPIs for software developers to avoid anything leaking out, so it usually leads to a hiding information until the very late point of the project when they're discovering that the definition of done is actually not where it should be. Thank you.
Good. Can I ask something about MiFID II?
Sure, please.
Because that's a topic that comes up a lot in we run two conferences like this in London, and it's been a huge theme, obviously. I mean, one specific requirement of MiFID II is that financial investment firms, financial firms test their algorithms and self-certify that those algorithms are not going to disrupt markets, and I find that a very interesting challenge. I mean, is that a big part of your business? I mean, are your clients wrestling with this challenge, or is there an easy solution?
I think most of our clients on the sales side are currently looking on what they need to do, but I wouldn't say that there are clear requirements for them to really work on implementing something. It is possible to take software available inside any market infrastructure and use it for algo testing. But I think in most cases it requires very substantial financial investment, and that's why no one really is currently looking into that.
So, I mean, does that mean that, I think MiFID II comes into force next year, does that mean that's a big problem, or do you think regulators have just sort of realised that they've asked for something that's not really practical?
Well, it is difficult for me to comment. I think they will realize that it is not really practical.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Iosif.
Thank you.